Seth Painter here with the Pharma CX Tech Summit, the 4th annual edition of our show. And this is the capstone activity, our final presentation for today, which is a conversation with Michael Kirzhner from AbbVie. A little bit of background here. I am an old data geek, and last week I had the pleasure of seeing Michael present. I said, hey, you're kind of looking at this and thinking about this in a way that makes sense, but not a lot of people do. So I'd love to get you on Panagora CX Tech event and be able to talk about this a little more, because I think that's it's kind of, you're doing some cool stuff, and I think that it's something that folks could really bring to their organization and maybe help out the customer experience. So Michael, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do? Do you have a disclaimer for us?
Sure. Michael Kirzhner, I'm with AbbVie. I'm in the IT organization, but I think our IT organization is going through a transformation along with the company as well. And what we're realizing is that we need to support customer experience a lot more than we have done in the past. We've relied a lot on consulting partners, and they're still important, but we need to start building the expertise. And for the customer experience to really work, how do we create a connected experience? We have a lot of systems. We have a lot of things that we're trying to actually coordinate, and we're trying to build capabilities in a way that it does create that connected experience. So my role in the organization is to spin up this capability and allow all the different teams within BTS or our IT organization to work cross-functionally and really understand what does the customer experience need, how do all of our systems work together to bring that customer experience to life.
And do you have a disclaimer?
No disclaimers. I think
just
not gonna share probably all the secret sauce, right?
Well, that's what I wanted to have. So you mentioned this a little bit about the digital transformation and what you're trying to do in the organization. So what is your overarching philosophy that powers that digital transformation, trickles down to your data strategy? Is there a handful of things?
Yeah, I think the overarching philosophy is that we need to simplify and we need to make sure that the systems work in unison, right? So in the past, we would do tactical approaches and say we have different channels, we'll have capabilities in the channel. How do we bring it together into a coordinated experience and a coordinated ecosystem? And that experience has to be powered by data, right? So as much as we're thinking about those orchestration capabilities that we have and that we're trying to build, how do we actually set up the data in a way that allows us to actually do it in an efficient, intuitive fashion, right?
And so what were the specific challenges as it pertained to data and CX? Like, what were you seeing in your organization, and what did you need to see and have happen on the other side?
I think the number one challenge that we saw was just the diversity of data, right? So when we looked at our customer experience and we kind of had this image, like if you imagine a funnel or your customer experience as a funnel with all the different interactions that you have with a customer, and we would plot the different experiences or the different interactions onto that funnel, the amount of variability, the way that funnel looked was really hard for us to actually tie that string of the experience together, right? And say, well, how do we go from one channel and continue the story that we're trying to tell to the customer throughout email, field, web, media? How do they actually all complement each other easily, right? When the data looks that different. So that was probably the number one challenge that we faced. And because of that, that's kind of ballooned into integration challenges, coordination challenges, operating model challenges. All those things probably stem from the data challenges that we have faced.
And then internally, when you're looking to execute cross-channel or pair data for analysis, how was that
Exactly.
affected?
So I think to your point, there was few things that basically were the results of that environment, right? Is we couldn't do the cross-channel coordination. It was just took a lot of meetings, a lot of coordination between people to actually execute it. So the speed was not there. So it was not easy to do. For analytics people to get the insights, if you think about the coordinated experiences that we wanted to create, our vision was to say we wanted to have connected, insight-driven, intuitive customer experiences, right? There's a lot of things that are built into those statements. And if we look at insight-driven, we needed to enable our analytics teams to be able to take the data and find those nuggets of information to say, well, how do we propel that experience and get the customer to the point of conversion, whatever that is, right? In an efficient manner that feels good to the customer. It's efficient for us. It's a win-win kind of a scenario. But for them to be able to do it, the challenge was with that variety of data, they had to spend a lot of time actually making the data look a certain way before they could actually start any analysis. And probably everybody is experiencing very similar things. If you're in analytics, I'm sure this is very familiar.
Well, that was going to bring us up to speed here. The challenges that you're talking about here, you have a lot of data. It's all different shapes and sizes, extremely complex. It's hard to do the cross-channel. It's hard to get a consistent view. You're not alone, right, in your organization. And, everybody that's watching and everybody that deals with data is saying the same thing. And they're saying now, so what, Michael? So what? Big deal. We're all in the same boat. What did you do? Meaning you as an organization, you as individual heading up this effort, but what did you do to affect the digital transformation? What did you do with the data? How are you guys looking at it? What did you do differently that might be of interest to our folks that are in the same proverbial data boat?
Yeah, so I think we took a step back and we said, all right, we do have variability in data and we know why it happens, but if we look at all the channels, can we have a common thread? Can we simplify the problem statement, right? And ask very similar questions across the channels so those channels could actually speak at least a similar language, right? So if our goal is coordination, and I think that's the important part, like you have to understand what is your goal with the data, understand the problem, and then understand how you're going to tackle it. So we were not trying to tackle the complexities of each individual channel. That was not our objective. But we were trying to see what is that common thread between the channels and how can we simplify our data model or our data structure, our data management to bring the unity of data across the channels, because that was the objective of understanding a customer from a holistic lens across every channel. So we boiled it down to.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask you. There's 4 components to the common thread, was there not?
Yes, there were 4 components. But I think we boiled it down to 4 things. Do we know who do we talk to, right? So if we wanted to actually build that coordinated experience, we need to understand the individual that we're actually engaging. So we were very particular about identified data, generating identified data, purchasing identified data, right? And managing the customer identification process. The second piece was, do we know what we talked to that customer about? Do we know the message that we showed that customer? And is that message consistently represented across the channels, right? Then the third thing that we said is like, do we know why we talk to the customer? I think all of us engage agencies and we say, here's an ask, please go do this thing. And we call it campaign IDs, but when we go across channels, not everybody has the same regimented approach. So we wanted to understand why was the engagement even occurring. And lastly, we wanted to understand what did the customer actually do? What did we do with that message and what did the customer do in return? And we wanted to also understand that in a consistent manner across the channels. And the simplest way that I could probably describe it is, regardless of the channel, I could probably say I either tried to talk to the person reacted in any fashion, right? Like they actually saw my message, they reacted to it in some fashion. And thirdly, they reacted in a way that actually is important to me. There was a true engagement. They did what I expect them to do. We could call it MVAs, engagement. There's many different terms that we could probably attach to it. But if we think about it in those three buckets, then the channels start to understand each other, right? You don't have to talk about clicks. You say, did we talk to them? Did they do something? Did they do what we want? And then the channels could actually coordinate each other.
So the way I'm understanding this is that you're actually organizing your data in ways that are actually informed by more generalization, less detail, less granularity. We have all this data out there where we can drill down into very specifics, and you're actually pulling it back and really keeping it simple.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to think about it. We keep it simple and we try not to lose data, but we keep the simplicity for a very specific reason. Is to give us, our organization, when we talk to other organizations, the appropriate focus. It's very easy to get lost in the details. So we want to have the detail and we want to have the richness, but when we engage our partners in either commercial operations, analytics, the brand teams, we want to have a common thread of a conversation and a true focus with what's going to drive value. So I think those four pieces is what allows us to be laser focused on what we believe is going to deliver the value. And then we ensure that those other things are more supportive of it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we talk about an email channel. I will answer those four questions, but then I still going to ask the email channel, what is the subject line, right? What is the device? What is the things that you would typically ask of a channel? But I want to make sure that those four other questions are answered consistently and give us the focus that we need when we actually try to do things that are cross-channel.
In order to interlock that with some other functionalities and find out exactly how those four things are forming with both the individual channel and the channel in which they're being integrated. So talk to me about like getting data. You mentioned getting data from or working with an agency or email campaign or something along those lines. Data often comes in from third-party sources in all shapes and sizes. So like, how do you manage that? How do you align, you make sure that data is aligned to the your organizational parameters, or like, how do you tackle data?
Yeah, so I think that the other thing that we realized, and before I came to AbbVie, I worked in GS and a few other organizations, that we were tasked with how do we build solutions to actually manage third-party vendors, right? And the typical approach that we've seen is you have a standard layout, you have some kind of a file interface agreement, and then you go out to the vendor and say, can you please meet this requirement, right? And then what we observed is that it creates a lot of misunderstanding. You basically, there's transformation to the vendor's data that happens that you assume is correct, but maybe it's not correct, right? So we took a little bit different approach and we said, listen, we know what we want, like what attributes we want from the vendors. Can we understand what is the vendor actually generating as far as their data? And can they support answering those four questions? So like, we will not compromise on a couple of things. We will not compromise on getting specific, if we can, getting the specific customer. We will not compromise getting the creative code. We will not compromise getting the campaign ID. We will not compromise on getting some kind of activity code, right? It doesn't have to be in a specific format, but we want those attributes to be available to us in the data that we're going to procure or get from our partners. The other thing that we try to do is to get transactional level data, right? So a lot of times we observe that we get report level grade or aggregated data, and then it's hard to actually make decisions. So we changed from trying to push a specific standard layout or FIA to really building a partnership with the vendors and understanding their data, how they generate it, and then taking on through conversations and understanding how do we actually map it to what we need.
You're actually talking to your data partners and not just automatically ingesting the data, hoping it's going to be in the format that you want, and finding out later on that something's missing or broken or something along. Doesn't it sound like more work for you?
It does, but it seems like it's a lot more work up front, but it's more about partnership and leaning in. So in AbbVie, we have a term, you have to lean into the partnership, or you have to lean into the work. And to really do data right, you have to have an understanding of the data. So those conversations of talking to the partners and they know their systems, learning about their data allows actually for maybe a lot less work later on, because once you do data stewardship, data quality, the conversations that you have with your partners comes from a level of understanding versus of abstraction of the FIA that you generated.
I think a lot of this work in the data industry, whether on the vendor side or manufacturer side, finds that point of view rather refreshing, even though there is some difficulty associated with that. So, how long were you at this? Where are you at now? What has happened? What are some of the good things that have happened as a result of this that contribute to value?
Yeah, so we've been at it. We had the vision, right? Probably for a number of years. For 5 years, there was a vision to do digital transformation. Coming from AbbVie, we have a fairly, we're lucky enough to have Humira in immunology. So we had a place or a group of brands that had sufficient budget to really try to push the envelope and innovate at least from a funding perspective. And about 2 years ago, as we were thinking about expanding our portfolio for immunology with new products, it became more evident that we needed more robust capabilities. And we were able to build a case to get capital investment to really kind of rebuild our foundational capabilities, to take this new approach to the next level and dissociate this work from the day-to-day tactical work that we do. So that's one way that we did it differently, is that we created a dedicated team that was focused on rebuilding the foundation, kind of our ecosystem. And we've been doing it for the past 2 years, going through the actual architecture, running the RFPs. And now we're kind of at a point where we've built some key capabilities that we wanted, and now we're rolling them out. And we did it for the orchestration capabilities and for the data capabilities also.
And then how's the analytics internally, the reporting, marketing decisions, anything like that? Obviously, you're going to have a better consistency and governance on the data side, but how has it affected, the marketing side, the customer experience side, et cetera?
Yeah. So I think when we rolled out Skyrizi, and because Skyrizi was a green field, we were able to take some of those ideas that we had around how do we actually create that consistency of data, and we built it into their brand plan, brand story. And by doing that and then building the technology around it, for the very first time, we were able to create a truly cross-channel dashboard. So that's one example. And not only were we able to create a cross-channel dashboard, we were also able to leverage the consistency of data to take our MBA to next levels, right? Our MBA is truly leveraging consistent data to understand that common view of the customer and improve the next best action, or what's the next best message, because everything is already translated into more of a common language. So that's where we're at. The other thing that we're seeing a benefit in is, as we're doing our execution, right? In the past, I'll give like an anecdotal example. We would say like everybody has trigger campaigns, right? And let's say that there's some activity that happened that we want to send an email about. And that activity was based on, or we want to suppress it based on an IREP email, or like based on an email that our reps are sending from the Viva system. So the example that we had was, we want to send an email, we want to send a communication to our customer because we observe certain behavior. We want to give our customer, or we want to give our reps the opportunity to send it first because we know the open rates are better. But if the rep doesn't do it, we want to send it from our home office or from our marketing automation system because we don't want to lose the opportunity to talk to that customer about that topic. But for that coordination to happen, the marketing automation system had to understand which email templates it had to watch out for from the Viva CRM system, and everything was working at an ID level. If you see this template ID, then don't send this email. Once we were able to have a more common language as far as cross channels, we were able to say, hey, if you see this message happening in another channel, then don't send it in this channel. If you don't see it happen in the other channel, then send it through this channel, because we don't want to lose an opportunity to say that point to our customer.
Sounds so simple, but probably more difficult to orchestrate in real life and automate using data as well. So there we are at the end of our time, Michael. I do thank you for joining us and sharing your experience with us here at the 4th Annual Panagora Pharma CX Tech Summit. You will join us for future Panagora CX events. The next one most likely coming up in March, our larger, broader CX festival. I'd like to thank all of our panelists and all of our attendees, all of our speakers today for another great event. Ideally, the next time we see you, we will be live. But again, thank you for a wonderful day of conversation and discussion. And on behalf of my co-host, Kristen Winters, that is it. We're all done. You can, however, opt to join me in the post-event networking sessions. If you just go back to the lobby, choose one of the 4 sessions or from the agenda, and join us.
We're all done. You can, however.
Yeah. Here's Kristen Winters. Join us in the post event networking sessions, what we used to call a happy hour. Or is it? So anyway, with that, thank you very much, and we will see you after the show. Cheers.